It is day 12 of the Dale Warner murder trial, and the prosecution and the defense rest. I'm Melissa Andrews, a crime and investigative reporter covering this trial. Dale Warner is accused of murdering his wife Dee in 2021 and then welding her inside of a fertilizer tank where she was found 3 years later. So we start off the day getting some housekeeping matters out of the way. The defense makes a motion for what's called a directed verdict. I've seen this before, so it's not too unusual. Basically, a directed verdict is a ruling by a judge in a jury trial that ends the case before it goes to the jury because one party has not presented enough evidence to support their claim. So in this case, the defense is saying, hey, we don't think that the prosecution has proved that Dale Warner killed dee-warner. The prosecution says, Judge, we want you to deny this. We have clearly presented enough evidence. The judge was prepared for this because he read out all the reasons that there is enough evidence. He has to state all of this on the record. He denies the motion. Next, Dale Warner gets up and waives his right to testify. This involves him standing up, raising his right hand, and his attorney, Mary Chartier, is with him. The judge and Mary ask him a series of questions. Basically, are you waiving your right to testify? Do you know what this means? Have you talked this over? Has anyone forced you to do this? The 32nd witness, the first for today, the defense calls Julie Bach, Dale Warner's ex-wife. And you may be confused about why her name is Bach, because Dee's children's name is Bach. Well, when Dale and Dee got together, she married Dee's ex-husband. That's the reason behind that. So she was not on the stand, I think, even 10 minutes. The direct examination was very quick. It seemed like the defense really just wanted to get out that Dale developed this cough while they were married, some sort of a cough. On cross-examination, so this is the prosecution interviewing her. They asked, you got divorced in 2003, you have 4 children. Yes, you got the marital farm and he had to pay you $100,000. She was a little unclear on that, so they showed her some documents. She said, I got the house, he paid off the house. He had the land and farm equipment. You were awarded full custody of the children at first. Yes. You had a custody hearing. Yes. You both had attorneys. Yes. He had to pay you $1,200 a month and then you had to ask to get more. Yes. The defendant called you a day or two after Dee disappeared. She said, yes, he wanted Cameron, their child, to come and do the books for the business. In a May 3rd interview, he said his lungs were burned from anhydrous ammonia. Would you? And then there was an objection, speculation, withdrawn. On redirect, so this is, again, the defense, she was asked, was the divorce civil? Yes. You went to lunch afterwards? Yes. 33rd witness, the second for today, is Todd Nay. He worked for DDW Investments, so he managed the trucking company in 2006 is when he started. He managed the drivers, grew the customer base, dealt with customers on a day-to-day basis. He said he was closer to Dee than Dale. So he says that he talks to Dee every day, and he last saw her on Friday, the 23rd at 3:30 in the office. He said she was agitated and wearing sweatpants, a loose-fitting top, and she wasn't made up like she normally was. You know that Dee Warner does not go out without her hair, makeup, and dress to the nines. We've heard that the entire trial, so this was unusual to him. So at 3:25 a.m. on 4/25, so this is just before Dee Warner is found to be missing by Raquel. So about 5 hours prior to that, he went to the farm to pick up a truck loaded to go to Indiana. He was gone in about 10 minutes, but he did notice that the kitchen light was on above the sink, the TV on in the living room and bedroom. He said that was normal. The previous Sunday, he did the exact same thing. On 4/25, he got back around 3:30 in the afternoon, and he went into the office where Raquel, Zach, and Parker Hardy were all in the office looking through these cameras. So while he was gone to Indiana is when everything hits the fan and people notice that Dee is not around. So Gregg called him in half an hour prior. He went over to his side of the office to get a couple of things in order for Monday and left. He went over to the spray barn, and Dale, he said, was in the spray barn loading the sprayer, and he came out and talked to Todd. He said he did not see him welding that day. He was asked, have you seen him weld anything? And he said, things that broke, but not often. So on cross-examination, again, this is the prosecution. You came to the farm. Stephanie Vocal was there. Dee liked to spend money on hair, jewelry, nails, and clothing. Yes, he said. She was always dressed up and ready to take on the world. Well, you got there at 3:25 and left at what time? About 3:40. Do you remember saying that you drove by the north side of the house to observe it? He said, no, I saw the light on in the kitchen and TVs were on. He was asked, were there any vehicles parked on the north side of the house? Remember, people had said that the JCB had been parked over there and the Hummer had been moved. He said the Hummer and Dale's pickup were there. He was asked, you didn't see the sprayer parked between building 1 and 2? He said, no, I think that the sprayer was in the spray barn. We had a couple of jury questions. In the last 2 years before 4/25/21, how many times have you seen Dale weld? He said, I didn't see him do any welding prior to that, but I also wasn't at the farm that much. So the 34th witness of today, of the trial, third today, was Gregg Hardy. And he is called by the defense. This is dee-Warner's brother. He said that he's 19 years older than Dee, and the defense wanted to get out of him, you really wanted details on this investigation. And he said, I wanted to find my sister. And then they go around and around and around because Gregg, it's a yes or no question is what they want. They don't want him to say why he wanted details of the investigation, just that he wanted details. So finally we get to the answer is yes. You offered a $50,000 reward for Dee's remains, and you had an eerie feeling while loading fertilizer on the Warner property. Did you tell the media that? He said, not true. You were allowed to come to the property and get tanks and fertilizer there? Yes. You told police you knew where anhydrous tanks were located, including those not on the Munger property? Yes. You told Michigan State Police there was a particular tank you wanted them to search on your sister's property. He said, not true. They showed him a clip. It was a news clip, I believe 48 Hours, the show that was out there. He says, that's my voice. He says it was a tank. You told police you know how to cut a tank open? Yes, he says. You've indicated that you believe there's a potential liability for you if the prosecution doesn't obtain a conviction for Dale Warner. He said, I spent 5 years looking for my sister. Mary asked the question again. And then he says, Mr. Warner was an evil person. So the judge tells the jury they need to disregard that. It's asked again. He says no. Now he's shown a text message and she's saying, you indicated you did have liability. He said, that's what the text says. And she said, you wrote it? And he said, I did. On cross-examination, so this is the prosecution now interviewing Gregg Hardy. They talk about the rusty tank 8 photo in the spray barn, and they say, is that the tank you wanted them to check? And he said, yes. You saw that tank in the barn after your sister went missing. And he said, I did. And then they start talking about how he never lived in the home with Dee together. He was in college when she was born. And then he gets very emotional because they start talking about how he took on a fatherly role with Dee. He was asked, did you have a good relationship with Dale? And he said, yes, but that fell apart a month or two after Dee disappeared. So he's asked about what he's doing on 4/25. He said he went to a couple of barns on his property. He has breakfast, then he goes to another property to work. Shelly calls him while he was there, and he was surprised that Dee was missing. So he immediately called and texted his sister. He's asked, when you did call or text Dee, was it to check in or did you have a mission in mind? He said, we typically didn't just chat. When I called her, it was about something important. She would always answer, and she didn't answer, and this was concerning. So he talks about how Shelley, his wife, and Parker were looking for Dee and trying to put together the pieces. He was very surprised in terms of what made this disappearance different than others because he left her car and Angelina. So he found that very alarming. He went into the office. He and Shelley went to see Dale around 8 o'clock that night. He was in a tractor in a field east of their farm. He's asked about this, and he says you would till for a good seed bed and then directly plant behind that from a few hours to a day at most. So I thought this was interesting. I wondered if it was the prosecution's way of saying that maybe Dale was just in that field, not really doing anything on purpose, but he just needed to be out in the field. He said that Dale planted whatever it was in that field actually weeks later. So Dale tells Gregg that Dee took off after a hell of a fight. She took all of her stuff, and he said, hold on. So he pulls the ring out, Dee's ring, and he's throwing it, he said, up into the air like a golf ball. So at this point, Dale says, well, maybe somebody picked her up. He said, I called everyone I could think of, and Dale wasn't doing anything. Mary moves to strike, judge strikes. Did Dale indicate to you any efforts he was making to find Dee? He said no. On 4/26, which was Monday, you talked to Dale, yes? He came to my office at the milking facility. Did he mention a phone call in relation to Parker? He said yes. He asked if Parker could get a phone Dee had, an old phone they had replaced on a trip. Dee had left an old phone in the motorhome and asked Parker if he could get her info from her phone. This is Dale asking Parker to put it on that phone. He had also told Gregg that he had been locating his sister through OnStar. So he said, well, why don't we take those locations and go there? And if she's left with someone, we can look at security cameras to ID the person that she left with. He said Dale was not interested in this idea. After about 10 days, did you tell Dale you wanted him to do something in particular? He said, yes, around that time we'd been working to find her. It wasn't adding up. So I requested him to come to my office, and I was getting stern at this time. I told him I think he should offer a cash reward for the public to find his wife. And he was asked, did he agree to that? He said, no. Did you end up doing it? He said, I did. You organized a search party. Yes. I got no significant interest from Dale in making it public, but as the week went on, I decided we should take a search party. There were around 30 people in that search. They did 500 to 600 to 1,000 acres. Dale did not participate. They got some phone records of Dee, started tracing her calls to see if they recognized a number. They didn't. He would call if he found a number he didn't recognize. He made a public request for people to come forward. He did podcasts, media, billboards, anyone. They had another vigil on the year anniversary because apparently they did this not too long after she was missing. Detective Dreyer called him to let him know that her remains had been found. You indicated you may have liability if Dale isn't found guilty. Is that because of public statements you made? And Mary objects. The judge asked them to approach, and it is sustained because it was opinion. On redirect, he's asked, do you remember Mr. Warner was with Angelina during the search? And he says, I don't know where he was. So they were saying the reason Dale wasn't at these searches was because he was with his young daughter, who was 9 or 10 at the time. So the jury asked 5 questions. They all agree that 4 will be asked. First one, have you ever noticed bipolar tendencies from Dee, and is she bipolar? He said no. She would love me and hate me at the same time, but no. Have you ever witnessed Dee abusing prescription pills? Absolutely not. Were you aware she would leave for days at a time? If so, what alarmed you this time? Well, as we've heard before, she would not leave without Lena. Apparently, she went to stay at his house at one point and would bring the kids, but the kids are now grown, so it's been a while. And then he slips out, she would always share the frustration and the toxicity of the marriage. Objection, hearsay. Judge sustains and strikes the toxicity part and the frustration part. He's asked again, at what point did your relationship with Dale start going bad? He said, gradually over a 2-month period. I spent endless hours trying to, objection, exceeds the scope of the question. So they're allowed to, the attorneys are allowed to follow up also with these jury questions. So Mary says, you said she would come to your home with her children, but this has been a long time, several years. You said Dee would love you and hate you at the same time. He says she had a very dynamic personality, very outgoing, very loving, but if she disagreed with me, she would let me know. And then he gets emotional again. If she were mad at me, she would probably hug me tomorrow. So then the prosecution follows up. You were aware she would go to the lake house and stay. He said, I was told that. Was she ever out of contact when she left? He said, there was never a time my sister wouldn't take my call. Gets emotional again. So the defense rests at 10:45. And the question that was not answered by the jury, do you know of any enemies your sister had? I really like these jury questions. I'm not used to it. This is the first trial I've ever seen happen, but it really gives you an insight into what they may be thinking. Do you know of any enemies your sister had? So the judge dismisses the jury for the day, tells them you'll be back at 9 o'clock on Thursday morning. We will have closing arguments for you, and they will get jury instructions. So I think the jury could get the case on Thursday for sure, because if we start at 9 and each side presents their closing arguments, the jury instructions could take, 45 minutes to an hour. I think they'll get it on Thursday. So when we left, we hung around for a little bit just to see if they were going to go back on the record today. They went and did their thing in the back. They were going over some jury instructions, and they're going to come in early on Thursday, Mary told us, to just mark some evidence into the record, I guess, and put some dates on the evidence. So they're going to do that early before they do those closing arguments on Thursday.